The way that I'm wearing pants that are up to my nipples and you can't even see. I look good, hey? This is pretty nice. The Cindered Shadows DLC chapters came out for Fire Emblem Three Houses early 2020, and ever since I played them, I cannot help but notice that the cast of Cindered Shadows, the Ashen Wolves, bear striking similarities to characters that were already included in the base game. I'm not saying that these characters were intended to be copies of existing characters. I don't think these characters were duplicates by any means, and they do have really competently written reasons for being cast members, and they have goals and ambitions and depth and dimension. I did just want to explore the superficial similarities that exist between some of these characters because I do believe that the parallels are a bit too strong to ignore. I'm running on a handful of hours of sleep, so I forgot to mention specifically that I think the Ashen Wolves are essentially the Golden Deer, which you probably gathered from the title of this video, so I actually don't even need to include this in the final edit. Now, Fire Emblem at Large and Fire Emblem Three Houses are archetypal in the characters that they use and continue to reuse. So, is it shocking that these characters don't reinvent the wheel? No one is surprised. Nobody moved. The first pair that I would like to discuss is probably the most obvious one. It's the only one that I can find on Reddit threads and while Googling, and it's the comparison between Yuri and Claude. The most common opinion is that Yuri is what everybody in the fandom wanted Claude to be, which I can get behind. Just from what the game is telling us, they're both Lord characters, big bisexual energy we simply cannot ignore. Yuri is canonically queer. Claude, I believe, although the evidence is only in my mind, but he has to be at least a little gay. Both characters are depicted as sneaky and secretive. For example, Yuri is an underground criminal. Claude is mostly above board, obviously because he's the leader of a nation. He's just maybe a little bit underhanded. They're both presented to us as master tacticians. They're pretty secretive. Both have hidden their real names at birth. And then on the gameplay front, they both have high speed, high lux, luxurious because they're rich. They both have high speed, luck, dexterity, and charm, but they're a little bit fragile. Next, I want to talk about Happy and Marianne. This pairing is not as closely tied, I feel as Claude and Yuri, and Happy also bears some similarities to Lysithea as well. But between Happy and Marianne, both have secret crests, both have ties to beasts. So Marianne has the crest of the beast from Maurice, who is known as the Wandering Beast. Drink every time I say beast in this section. Marianne basically has this association with this eldritch horror, and whenever Happy sighs, monsters are drawn near her. And this is mostly where the similarity between Happy and Lysithea is drawn, just because they are both byproducts of experimentation by those who slither in the dark. And they both also use dark magic. Happy's ability to summon monsters whenever she sighs comes from this experimentation. As far as we know, I'm pretty sure that's correct. If it's wrong, you should subscribe and correct me in the comments below. Stats-wise, Marianne and Happy very similar. High resistance, high magic, high dexterity. They both learn offensive faith magic more so than a lot of other characters, although Happy is neutral for faith. That's the biggest thing that doesn't work here for me, is that Happy's not a natural healer. Another thing of note is that they both have hidden talents in a physical weapon, which I think is interesting because most of the other magic characters aren't really viable as physical units, but I feel these two characters are a little bit more so. And they're also both competent in riding and flying, so going for that movement is a lot more appealing. Constance and Lysithea, I feel this one is also pretty obvious, just because they are the most powerful magic units in the game. Lysithea is a lot better because she's faster and has better dexterity, but they're both just glass cannon magic users. For me, the major similarities between them come from the pressures of being from a noble house. With Lysithea, she knows that House Ordelia is likely going to end with her just because of the experimentation that was done on her. She doesn't think she'll live very long, so she plans on abolishing the house because of this. Constance has the opposite plot journey, where she's concerned with reestablishing her fallen house. that was disgraced because of the war with the Adrestine Empire and Brigid. Also, both of their houses have a really strong association with the Adrestine Empire. This isn't a one-to-one comparison, so it's not necessarily that useful, but I do think Constance's indoor personality is a little bit more like Marianne, whereas her outdoor personality is a little bit more like Lysithea. Again, that one, my arms hurt a little bit from the reach, but I feel like the rest of this holds. These next two characters are the reason why I wanted to make a video about this at all, and they are Balthus and Raphael. The previous three couples that I've discussed, like I said, they all bear strong, superficial similarities to each other. With Balthus and Raphael, that does not exist. They are both beefy gauntlet users from the Alliance, but otherwise, they really couldn't be more different. Raphael is a commoner from a merchant family. His parents die in a monster attack, and after they do, he sells off their estate, which I've played this game a lot. I did not know that he had an estate to sell. And then eventually Raphael takes over his grandfather's inn and he becomes an excellent cook. That's his journey. Wholesome. Balthus is disgusting. He is half noble, half not. His mom comes from a small village, and Balthus has a crest, so he's supposed to be next in line to his house, but then there's a stepmom who gets in the way of all that, and it's actually, I never want to see you again. And Balthus is you really don't need to tell me twice. I am leaving right now. And then he just incurs a bunch of debt and winds up in the abyss. But what's interesting to me is that Balthus integrates extremely well into the Golden Deer. All of the Ashen Wolves integrate really, really well into the existing world of Three Houses, and they functionally serve to embellish the world beyond what we get in the base game. Honestly, all of them are really well-written characters and they add a lot. For me, Balthus has the most dimension and the most to add to the canon of Three Houses because he's childhood best friends with Holst. He has a pre-existing relationship with Hilda. She sees him like a brother, basically, because of his presence in her life when they were young. Balthus also has a pre-existing relationship with Lysithea because he hid in Ordelia territory for a little bit when he was running from debt collectors or whatever it is he was doing. And he has really well-written supports with Claude. The Ashen Wolves kind of get the short end of the stick, or actually maybe it's a blessing in disguise. The Ashen Wolves don't have as many supports as the characters who are in the base game, which I think leads to the writing of those supports being stronger. They just happen to have less. Whereas there's none of this forced nonsense that a lot of the other characters have. So this leads me into a discussion about character writing and every character's purpose for being there. I have a video already talking about Ignatz in depth and why his character in this world doesn't really work. Similar logic applies here. If we look at the Black Eagles, everyone is a noble except Dorothea, but she's an esteemed opera singer, so it's not really the same. And Petra, she's not a noble, but she is a prisoner of war who is a princess from another country. So again, not the same. Ash is a commoner, but he was adopted into a noble house. Dedu is best friends with the crown prince. By comparison, Ignatz, Raphael, and Leonie are just around. All of that is to say, I think the commoners have a hard time justifying their place in this world and their place in this game and in the story. Raphael is not the worst character. That is a seat held by Leonie. But Raphael is really flat, not flat-chested, but he just really doesn't bring much to the table. A little bit of comic relief and being great friends with Ignatz. But a lot of his supports are some of the weakest in the game because there's no pre-existing relationship and he doesn't have goals. So it's what do you talk about? What do you have to discuss? This character literally can't go anywhere. And then Balthus enters the chat fully formed. He has a purpose in this world. He has something to offer. It's really interesting to me that Balthus, as well as the other Ashen Wolves, but Balthus in particular, feels like he could have been cut content in an early stage of the game. All of these characters feel like they could have been cut content, or they had existing stories that were retooled into something else, and the creators didn't want to have too many similar characters in the base game. I feel like any of those could be possible, especially if you look at data mining for the game. You can tell that these characters were planned to be here. I'm pretty sure from the base game. It could have been from the season pass that we knew that they were going to add more characters, but I think in terms of character slots that are in the coding, I think only one character is not accounted for. There's a Fargast video about it. I'll It'll be somewhere. What I'm saying is they had these characters ready to go. So maybe it was the intention the whole time that they were going to add them in later and they already had a stake in the world. But I don't know. Raphael just like pales in comparison to Balthus, in my opinion. It just makes me wonder why they chose a comic relief character who effectively serves as someone else's best friend and nothing more. Why they would have chosen that character over another one who has something to offer. This video doesn't really have a point. I just wanted to share that these characters all feel a little bit too much like each other for comfort, but then like Balthus and Raphael are the biggest outlier. And like no one's talking about it. Could it be because they don't matter? Thank you so much for your question. It is so important to ask questions. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment. I talk about video games. I just finished a Naruto rewatch, and I think I'm going to make a silly little PowerPoint presentation and recap Naruto. I think that'll just be so fun. It's kind of a good show. Isn't that crazy? Okay, bye. I'll see you in the next one. Sleep well. Drink lots of water. Maybe have a multivitamin if you have any kicking around. Okay, good night.